So I finally cracked because of this event. I was going as long as I possibly could with no hints, no guides or anything. And I finally got to MN-4 and I cracked. I was like, okay, I have to look up my positioning's wrong or something. I think I had the general idea, but I was just getting to a point where my positioning was just not as good as I wanted it to be. So I had to end up looking up stuff. I got real quick though. There's a little banger in it. I just realized how hard the backdrop goes, or the background music rather. So I'm going to explain kind of where I'm at. I did make a couple of changes to what I seen in the guide. This is all the units that I use. I'll kind of explain them as they deploy. One thing this stage really taught me was using 2 stars, 1 stars. They help out tremendously. There's nothing like having a good setup. So Vanilla comes out. She is actually going to be part of the guide. A lot of this is going to be kind of to the T of what the guide does. At the very end is when I start making changes. And I'll talk about that when we get to it. So Vanilla, obviously she's going to come out for the DP. We are saving up for the 2-star caster. Took me a long time to realize that I was going to use her instead of like my higher level caster, because it just took too long to get them out. So then I pop off the ult obviously for the DP recovery, pop out my healer to help out my Vanilla here just to keep her alive. And then I end up using Cliffheart. So it took me a little bit because I was using a support Cliffheart, just to get the general idea to have a little bit higher of a level, because at the time my Cliffheart was not very strong. I did put a little bit of resources into her. I did not E1 her, but she is level 50, so it took me a little bit of time to get her a little bit up. Now the main idea, if you did not play it this way, because there's a couple of ways you can play this stage, is that anything that passes Vanilla will get pulled by Cliffheart, unless you have her E1, then her range is up here and then you can just pull people anyway. You don't have to wait for them to pass by Vanilla. But I use it as kind of like a insurance claim. I guess anytime that somebody walks by like that, I could just pull them. And by the time that they got there, you know, they weren't walking past too far. And then I put out my AoE caster here. Again, this is going to be another 2-star unit that I had to use because of the cost and everything. It just took a little bit too long to get some of those other people out, like Lava and stuff like that. And it was just to get everything to kind of work. This is one that really mattered about timing, when to get somebody out, how to get them out, how much it's going to cost to get them out. It taught me a lot. So I'm actually thankful that I looked up the guide, because it gave me another perspective. Now, not a lot changes here until this guy dies. That's when I'm going to kind of build up this area over here. I end up putting out the 1-star healer, and then I put out Beagle. She is going to help out with blocking. Now she will get overwhelmed because I don't have a high enough level. And then I put Noir here. I think that's how you say his name. And that's mainly just because when these guys come and they do quite a bit of damage, I want to make sure she's not getting overwhelmed, and my Cliffheart is able to kind of eliminate some of the different units, but not also being able to get overwhelmed and stuff, because obviously she's on a skill timer and can't just pull everybody she wants. So as it goes through, nothing really changes here. We have pretty much our prime setup. So this is actually the prime setup that I watched in the guide. Now, the reason that I make a lot of changes because a lot of these units aren't E1, E2 and stuff. So I did end up having to kind of circulate some units out, and I'll kind of explain that once we get there. So I'll let it go on ×2 here. You can kind of see what's going on here. It does seem like everything is going to get a little overwhelmed. I think a Vanilla finally does. And then I take her out, and then I put my guard there to kind of help out, because right here, I think, yeah, so she gets overwhelmed. I put the guard out for a little bit of damage. She'll actually eventually almost die as well. If she doesn't die, I can't remember if I retracted her at the same time, but then Noir is just going to pretty much block everything because he's a beast. So going into this, the next change I'm going to make is when Beagle gets pretty low. So basically what she's doing is just tanking all of this effort here, but she will eventually get kind of knocked out. So the big thing though was just kind of like the sequence of events. So this really taught me, and I know you guys have been harping on me on the comments and stuff like that about the order that people come out. And a lot of the time, and I'll kind of explain it when it happens though, is that I would take out this guard, because the idea was like, okay, well, I'll just replace Beagle with a different guard. But whenever I did that, they took out my healer with like in seconds. So then I would put out the new healer, and then they would target the healer because she was the last one out. So what I ended up having to do is wait until Beagle was kind of low here. And then you can see that I start making changes. So the caster goes out first. They're going to target the caster. I put the healer out. They're going to target the healer. But then I put out the next defender. They go back to targeting the defender. Took me a little bit of time to realize that that's the sequence of events that needed to happen there in order for them not to target my caster or my healer. Spent a lot of times like, oh, I'm in a good spot. I did. I'm so smart that I, pretty much got rid of Beagle and, pretty much saved the run, just for them to be like, oh, screw your healer, screw your caster, because they're the last ones out. So yeah, very important. Also, I wait for her ult, mainly because it does stun her. And I didn't want to do what ended up happening is if I used it a little bit too early, she would end up stunned and they'd just walk past her. and then I would end up losing. So I pretty much wait until the very end when these guys are the only ones left, because eventually, or actually it gets down to HP, I think it is. Yeah, so I ended up stunning them, and then this is kind of the end of it. And then Cliffheart goes ahead and takes out the boys here and wraps it all up. So I was actually pretty happy with this one, even though I did use a guide. I think it's pretty cool that I was able to kind of come up with this idea, and it really taught me just like the timing of everything. So I am actually thankful for the guide, because it did teach me like some of the different units that I needed to use. And then I was able to use some of the different timing effects and like kind of order of operations is basically, I guess, what I'll call it, to be able to get everything done. So I think that's about as far as I'm going to be able to get, unfortunately, in the event. I don't think that I'm going to be able to do MN-5. We'll definitely see what I can do for it. But anyway, I wanted to show you guys that one and just kind of talk about it. But I will see you in the next one. Have a good rest of your night, guys. Peace.